Hello everybody, it's Rose Lucas here from Liquid Amber Press, and it's my very great pleasure tonight to introduce our feature reader whom we had read at our September Poetry Zoom. But before I do that, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country I'm sitting on tonight. I'm sitting on unceded Wurundjeri country, and I would very much like to acknowledge their custodians and their leaders, past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge the ways in which colonialism has left complex and complicated traces. And we are committed to communication and to repair in both our personal and in our professional lives. But tonight I would like to introduce you to the reading that Sarah Rice did for us last week at the September Liquid Amber Poetry Zoom. So thank you, Sarah, for giving permission for this recording. We're really thrilled to be able to put it on our website and have folk be able to revisit it or see it perhaps for the first time. We had an absolutely wonderful night that evening. We had a whole gang of very strong open mic poets, and we had Sarah read to us as well. So I would like to introduce Sarah, and then I'm going to hand over to her. So Dr. Sarah Rice, this is quite an impressive CV, by the way, so buckle up. Dr. Sarah Rice is interested in the intersections between poetry, philosophy, music, and art. She holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of New South Wales and a graduate diploma from the ANU School of Art, where she also lectured in art theory for many years. Sarah is regularly commissioned to write ekphrastic poetry in response to visual art and crafts, and collaborates with institutions such as the National Gallery of Australia, the National Portrait Gallery, and the Australian Design Centre. Sarah exhibits her own visual work inspired by her poetry, and her visual work has been included in national and international journals and exhibitions. Sarah collaborates with other visual artists, including ceramicists, printmakers, photographers, composers, and letterpress artists. Her most recent project, Texture, and there's a nice dash in the middle of that, slash I should say, was a 2-year Arts ACT funded collaboration between herself, a choir, and 6 composers, with a final performance and book published by Recent Work Press. Sarah's art and poetry chapbook, Care Stop, was published last year, also by Recent Work, and her full-length poetry collection, Fingertip of the Tongue, from UWAP, won the Islands International Book Award. Her limited edition art book of poetry, Those Who Travel, remember travel, is included in the permanent collection of the National Gallery of Australia. Sarah won the inaugural Ron Pretty and the Bruce Dorr Poetry Prizes, and won the Writing Ventures and Gwen Harwood Prizes. And she's been shortlisted in numerous national and international awards, including the Montreal, Bridport, Tom Howard, CJ Dennis, Fish and Overland, amongst others. Publications include the Global Poetry Anthology Award, award-winning Australian Writing, Best Australian Poetry, Ireland, Southerly, Cordite, the New Guard, ABR, and Australian Poetry Journal. As somebody on the night said, does that woman ever sleep? And I think the answer must be no. Anyway, I very much hope, I know you will enjoy Sarah's reading tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. That's a lovely introduction. And I just wanted to start off by saying that I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, which has never been ceded. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Liquid Amber Press and to both Rose and Pauline for inviting me and making this possible. And it's so exciting to see so many fantastic faces of poets and artists. I've noticed some artists in there as well. So that's wonderful. So this is going to be a bit of a hopefully a feast for eye and ear, a bit of an experience. So I'm showing a whole bunch of images, and I wanted to start really by showing where the journey began. So I'm now just going to share my screen. Prepare yourself for lots of images. Hopefully I will shrink back to being a tiny postage stamp, and you can focus instead on lots of images coming at you from all directions. So I'll just share my screen. Okay. Fantastic. Can everyone see that? Some thumbs up. Fantastic. So I'd like to start with a drawing that I did way back when I was doing my graduate diploma at the School of Art with one of my favourite media, which is chalk pastels. And I put this in here just to show that actually the very first things that I did with art were based on poetry. So then it wasn't a hard shift later to move into writing poetry based on art. So I quite like those circles that come back again. So this chalk drawing that I did was meant to be based on the moon and different haiku and poetry based on the moon. So this was a combination of two very short little excerpts. One, a fragment from Water Music, where it says, "The sky was a long roll of silk edged with the moon." So hopefully you can see some of that. And also from Yi Bo, the Korean poem, "The Moon in the Well," that says, "A monk grew enamored of the moon in a well. So he drew moonlit water to pour in a jar. When he came back to the temple, he found as he tilted the jar, the moon was gone." So this was also meant to be a combination of those two poems in this particular drawing. The next things that I did in my graduate diploma was make a lot of ceramics. So I was doing drawing and ceramics and printmaking as well. And the thing that I wanted to talk about with these ceramics was almost the ceramics became like a poem in themselves, or at least they became the manifestation of metaphor. And I love a good metaphor, as most people will know. So many of these platters were called carrying over because a platter carries over. And so too a metaphor is a form of carrying over. The definition of a metaphor is to carry over from one place to the other. The porters in Athens wear the word metaphor, in fact, on their overalls, or at least they used to. And so I liked this idea of the metaphor carrying over from one platter to the next. So as you can see, I made these ceramic platters with different drawings and glazes and painted glazes. And if I just flick through some of these, you'll see that the platters would join and the images would slip from one to the next, almost like a chain of signifiers for anyone out there who likes to read some Derrida, throw in a little bit of philosophy. So here is my chain of signifiers coming along, and then you can see an installation shot. So they were shown at the Canberra Potters Society. And so following on from this idea of metaphor, the next thing that I did was the book that Rose kindly mentioned. It was a limited edition art book of poetry that I did in collaboration with the printmaker Patsy Payne, who used to be the head of printmaking at the School of Art for many years, fantastic printmaker. And in fact, this is an example of pouncing for the people who are in my art class, who I can see in the chat. Pouncing, we can see that here. And also Karen Florence, who many people will know as a fantastic letterpress artist and a bookmaker as well. And this was just made in an edition of 17 because every page was hand printed. But why I've got this in here is it's a bit like a visual metaphor at play. So the little haiku that I've written says, "Buried tulip bulb keeps its promise to the spring, swears an oath in red." And what I like about this one is that although Patsy's drawing that she's done is actually a red heart, it's a sort of a metaphor between the red heart and the bulb. It starts to look like a bulb. And then when you read it together, this visual image along with the haiku, we start to see the idea of maybe the buried is the heart being buried underneath. And maybe it's been hidden down in the winter, waiting for the spring to arrive and come up with some new love. So there's a sort of a visual enactment of this metaphor going on here too. And following on with that, I just wanted to point out some of the collaborations and the commissions that I've done over the years with different artists, some of the ones that Rose mentioned. I think hopefully also just to start a conversation with people about the huge, rich possibilities that there exist between text and image, between poetry and art. And hopefully some of these will give you some ideas about how we can actually bring together something like philosophy, poetry, music, art, craft, art theory, and how they can all start to inspire each other. So keeping our heart metaphor, this was a collaboration with a glass artist, Harriet Swartzrock. This one was installed in the Canberra Glassworks, but some of you might have seen this work also went to the National Portrait Gallery too, before lockdown. And they're beautiful hand-blown hearts that she's made, and she's filled them with neon gases. And so so it makes it interactive. You can go up and bring your hands close to these hearts, and the neon gases will follow your fingers and be like a lava lamp or something like that. So they were really, it's a wonderful project that I did. And for the work that I did as part of it was an exhibition catalogue, and really it became a poem. And so now almost all the exhibition catalogues I do, they used to start off being art theory, but now they've become basically poems. And they draw from everything from philosophy. I think in this one I had quotes from Merleau-Ponty, the phenomenologist, but they also had quotes from people like Rumi. And a beautiful little line, I'll just tell you the little line from Rumi. In your light, I learn how to love. In your beauty, how to make poems. And so I did a whole sort of poetic visual series with these ones. And then, and that was the poetic exhibition catalogue. And so the next one was also with a glass artist. As you can see, I like glass artists. I find glass to be a very poetic medium, and it's a lot of fun to collaborate with different glass artists. So I'm going to read you out this poem. This one's called My Father's Ferns. It was a collaboration with the glass artist Lucy Quinn, with Outer Space Gallery, which is in Queensland, and with Red Room Poetry. So I was shortlisted in their fellowship. And so then they commissioned me to write a series of poems. If you're interested, you can look up Red Room Poetry, and there's a lot of links there to some of the other ones that I did in collaboration with Lucy Quinn. So she made these beautiful cast glass, black cast glass works. This was the exhibition catalogue poem that's got some of her artworks. And I'll just show you a couple of the images so that you have them in mind as I read the poem. So this is the sort of original one that she made, My Father's Ferns, kiln cast black lead crystal glass. And it's got a fern in there. And I thought it was a very moving story because her father was very ill, I think it was with lung cancer, and he gave his ferns on to her, to Lucy, to look after, which I thought was a very beautiful and poignant story. And she also did these amazing drawings of sort of ferns that she was going to make out of beads. And as you can see, they also look like lungs. So that will come up also in the poem. These were the actual works that she made. You can see that they're wrapped around with glass beads and crystals and things like that. And a little close up so you can see it a little bit better. And these are the three works that she's made. One was called My Father's Portrait, one My Father's Ferns, and I think the other was My Father's Mother and Father. And my poem sort of responds to these and this idea of imprinting into the glass. So I'll read out my poem now. My father's ferns, given me still green and light as a feather, all baby fronds tickling under my chin. Tiny tight fists fight against the old weathering, the slow unrolling of time, unstoppable, unshakable. How the spent leaf curls and hides itself, turning inwards, a slow becoming earth. How I suddenly remember chasing his shadow as a child. Breathe and watch the slow unfolding of the new frond, how it reaches towards the filtered sunlight, the corner of the patio, the open doorway, the grandchildren soon to be. You are glass to me, dear father, opaque just now and rough around the edges. Oh, if I could mould you differently, remove the silica from the sand, return you to the sea. The seaweed on the beach is blackened. The footprints can only stay so long before they walk back into the past. I imagine pouring molten glass into those passing hollows to capture the scuttle of a crab, the dog's evening walk. A father with his small daughter besides, before the rustling waves come to sweep up after. Did you pot these ferns yourself? How long, Dad, did the dirt stay under your nails, impressed in each pore, the black sod smelling good in your hands? Were their roots like matted maidenhair, finger bones, or a spun black web? Do you remember them even now they are gone underground? Look, there's the shadow of our two heads joined and falling across the ferns and in between their fingers, our two heads bent together, falling through the cracks, and your head, your shadow head, falls first and furthest. It is lying on the earth, the black earth, like that still under your nails. Sleep now, Father. Rest your weary head. I have work to do. The fire is not yet hot enough to melt these thoughts. I will need the white heat. Can you feel the roots stirring underground? They are rhizomes growing wings. The lacework of your lungs hangs in the air. The diagram of a diaphragm swims into view. It's red and blue. The pulmonary artery where the exchange occurs, areoles, arterioles, are handing over. You know how this is done, Dad. The pulse and push. The valves are like tiny doors that let you out but will not let you in again. Those blood-red doors. How easy it is done, Father. Watch me, watch me. To breathe is simple, really. Follow me, the fill and fall. See how my breathing fogs the mirror, blurs my face. See how I am cloud. See how I make opaque the features of your face. It's clouding over now, the beach deserted. The sand is grey, not gold, and all the waves hold shadows of themselves and look to drown in them. The seaweed blackens further, and on the beach, the comings and goings of the day have been recorded. And what a day it's been of fun and frolicking. But the sea is hungry. It will eat the passing dog, the crab, the footprints of the daughter and her dad. That's it. I have to take a deep breath after that one. So the next couple of little collaborations that I think are worth mentioning in this little journey of where we're going and where we've been have been to write poetry in response to other craftspeople, including a commission called Gathering Green, which was about Lola Greeno's mariner shell necklace in the National Museum. I think the National Gallery has just bought one of those. They're beautiful works. So something that I really enjoy working, particularly with craft artists. I think on the whole, poets tend to be a little bit overly in favour of the painters, and I'm bringing back the craftspeople single-handedly if I must. And this is another one, just to give you an idea of some other ways in which we can join poetry with the crafts. This was a collaboration with the ceramicist Patsy Healy, and with Craft ACT. She made these beautiful ceramic vessels that actually had my poetry painted, hand painted on. And that was a wonderfully fun project to be involved with as well. You can just see a couple of the examples here. Beautiful porcelain vessels. And then we've got collaborations with people like the photographer Ian North. This was a commission with the Art Monthly journal, and it was for the Canberra Centennial issue. And Ian North takes lots of photographs of Canberra. So I really enjoyed working with him as well. And the idea of playing with photography, I stuck this one in here because you'll see later on when we get to the next poem, I really enjoy working with poetry and then sometimes altering them by putting lots of drawings on top as well. And so the reason that I put these last couple of slides in for this section was to show you that even areas where I would normally be having to put on my art theory cap, they've started becoming even more poetic. So I had to, I was commissioned by the National Gallery of Australia to write an exhibition catalogue in response to Mike Parr, the Australian artist, about his archive, the Mike Parr archive, for the exhibition catalogue. And in the end, the only way to approach that crazy, huge, massive archive was through poetry. So gone was my typical art theory head. I sort of had some philosophy in there, some Sartre and some Derrida and all sorts of different things, but really list poems, found poems, photographs, as you can see here, ended up being the best way forward. And you can see a couple of examples of those where I would take little excerpts from the archive and turn them into sort of artistic, poetic found poems. And then last but not least, even in Axon Journal, a paper that I was meant to write, which started off a very straight paper about creativity and how we do creativity, etc., turned into really a process paper, which I think you'll find sort of relates to some of the poetry that I'll be reading later. So as you can see, this is the first page of my supposedly academic journal paper, which was a poem, photograph, drawing, strange dismantling, information, performance type of a paper in the midst of construction. And this idea of process and materiality, what the sort of materiality of things is really, really important. Oh, that was the next page of it. So you can see that this journal paper looked very, very strange. It's something that you can in fact look up. And if you're interested in following up a bit more, I'm just now going to read the final poem for this section. It's just a very short poem. And why I think this one follows on is because you'll see, some of you probably already know this poem called Speaking Bluntly, but perhaps most of you haven't ever heard it with the joy of being able to see the images. And hopefully we can be pleased about the fact that one of the possibilities you can do with Zoom and with the fantastic Liquid Amber Press, which is all about joining art and poetry, is that we get to see the two in conjunction, something that very rarely happens with most publications. Even with that last Axon Journal, they find it very difficult, or Text Journal, they find it very difficult to publish things that have images a lot of the time. So hopefully you'll enjoy hearing Speaking Bluntly with some of the images that I made, talking about the materiality of words. This idea that when we speak, we often speak about words as having a texture. We even say, oh, your words are very sharp, very cutting, or very soft. And I sort of wanted to play on that. So I used a lot of textured materials, a lot of sandpaper and all sorts of different materials to give this idea of our words having texture and weight and tone and taste like an object. Okay. These were just some process shots, sorry, I forgot to show them, from the exhibition called Material Poetics. Okay. Speaking bluntly, if words had a weave, we would feel when our lover spoke to us in Hessian, when we needed satin taffeta, and more subtle vocal fibres, the inflection of cashmere over merino or mohair. Or perhaps better, if words spoken could be felt like braille, a sensitive perception of the digits under the fingertips, 6 dots raised, pinpricks really, but the pattern is all. If the sound of the letter felt inside the cheek could have its sharpness tested by tongue and teeth before the utterance leaked out, Before lips parted company, we could test the word for bitterness the way we test a grape, sucking on the sour fruit in the dark fist of the mouth, holding it against the light to examine its translucence. Clarity and obscurity are measurements of density, the length of a word's shadow, its resistance to light, how sure-footed it is in the dark. Sometimes it seems impossible that speech is spoken by the likes of tongue and lips, those bodily blood-filled servants to flesh and heart, hatred and dreams. If words were guests only in the mouth, surely we would send them forth full and warm, and perhaps they would carry our message with more care. Words stick in our teeth like peppercorns. We are so very aware of the rough edges of the apple core against our mouth's sore corner, of the tough leather bay leaf left in by mistake, or the softness of silken tofu. Our lips know for certain the thick ceramic mug and the thin porcelain rim. We are so good at discerning too stale, too salty, too dry, or too hard. If we could ink up our words like a thumbprint, analyse the friction ridges, pick up the underlying interface of the epidermis, the better to transmit signals, the evidence would present not the word itself, but its pressure, and through impression, intention, weight. Words put their hands on us and press. Speech leaves its imprint, a smoky graphite smudge with its map of thin white lines where the fine print lies. And I think that's me for the first half. I think I went slightly over. Sorry there, Rose.
Oh, not a problem at all, Sarah. Thank you so much. What an absolutely wonderful, wonderful session. So I won't get too carried yet. Clap, clap, claps, everybody. But we've got, but wait, there's more.
Wait, there's more.
Yeah, exactly. So
I'll talk about the 2 projects in the second half.
Lovely. Okay, fantastic.
That's the one hard thing about switching over to a PowerPoint is that I can't get to see you. So hopefully you all look there and awake and happy. So nice to see you all there, all your lovely faces. Hands up if anyone has been inside the infamous Canberra bus shelter. Excellent, good. Anyone at least know what they look like? I'm going to show you one. Screen share coming up. Hold on one moment. All righty. Okay. Does this look familiar? Some nodding. This is in fact my nearest bus shelter, just up in Watson, up 1 minute from my house. It's a beautiful bus shelter right up in the reserve, which is a really lovely one. And so this is a poem. It's a very Canberra poem, and it's the basis for the lovely book Care Stop, which I will show you at the end, and hopefully Shane will or someone will mention how you can order it if you're interested. But I spend a lot of time outside taking photos of these bus shelters all around Canberra, and my poor lovely long-suffering wife would come with me often in the middle of the night, and I'd say, just stand there, I need your shadow, and squat there, and we'll wait for a car to come past to provide the light. And then I'd take these photos and then I would draw on top of them. So let me give you an example. So these are some of the shelters that I took photographs of, and then the carpet and the heater I have drawn in there to make them look like little shelters, actual shelters. So really this poem is all about homelessness, shelter, home, action, care, all of these sorts of things. And they were the subject of an exhibition that I had at M16 as part of the Internationalist exhibition. Here's just a little installation shot that you can see all of these photos with drawings on top, all in the room. And I had a huge projection at the back of a bus shelter. And yes, the bags are there on purpose, and you'll see why. All of the Woolies bags are also in there. Okay. So this is called Action, Bus Route 2. There's someone living in my bus stop. 2 bikes, 3 bags and a pair of crutches. He's been there 3 days now in the round concrete shelter with the blue and orange Action logo and the submarine windows where the wind whips round and about. There's a curved plastic seat in matching orange, and on it a guy, although today he was lying under the nearby oak, in amongst the roots of it, his feet in the dust and his shoulders pressed into the ribbed bark. I'm not quite sure what to do, but each time I've gone to the IGA, I've bent my steps to pass his little home and wondered. I do, after all, have a spare room, but by spare, I mean it has all the things I can't seem to spare, that sit round me like children, staff and stuff, with flaccid faces and plump bodies, bags of books from the Lifeline book fair, which gave me just last weekend the feeling that all was right with the world. So many there, all reading, all scurrying and burrowing between the covers, taking fistfuls of spines, grabbing and thrusting at the tables, all B104 and European history and card games, remainders and collectibles, and tables long and stretched. And the dust floated upward like little spirits, and a musty mould clung to many. But now that all seems somehow cheap, a bit trashy novel at the airport as you wing your way in from Hawaii, or return from that business thing in Ontario with little matching wheelie bags, and the transatlantic annoyance lasting longer than the jet lag, that the earphones on the in-flight entertainment iPad gave only a right-sided take on things. And those green Coles bags in my spare room, with all their worlds of paper and philosophy, sheepish counterparts to those down the road, sitting squarely on the orange curve, spilling their helmet, jeans and t-shirt secrets. And the crutches lean against the bikes, and the man leans against the tree still. And that's the book. So it's a lovely book produced by the fantastic Shane at Recent Work Press. It's just a small chapbook, and it's got all of the, not actually all, but a lot of the photographs with drawings and the whole poem as well. And please thank my lovely wife, whose shadow we are now looking at. She did that part very well. So the next poem that I'd like to read to you is a very short one, and you'll really need all your wits about you because the images come thick and fast. And I know that it's hard to listen and watch at the same time. And it's why often, if I'm doing these sorts of things, I'm often torn between, do I show the images as I read? Do I show the images first and then read? Do I read and then show the images? And it's a really interesting phenomenon about what our mind takes in. Sometimes the images really help, sometimes it's a distraction. So that's just a point to sort of observe in a way, how you go when you're taking in both the images and the words. And let's hope that, that you can do it happily for this next one. So this one's called Routine Rituals, and the poem is called Self-Reliance, and the entire show was called Routine Rituals, that had the artwork along with the poems. And this was exhibited at M16 Gallery as part of their Wordsmith exhibition. These are all chalk drawings that I've done again with my favourite chalk pastels. And they were shown like this. So as you can see, it was a very interesting, sort of like a salon hang, but each of the images related to each of the others. All right. And it's sort of about loneliness. Maybe it's a lockdown poem that came years before lockdowns, and what you do when you're on your own and no one tells you it's time to go to bed, and no one notices you do all of the things that you do in your house. So hopefully it will resonate with some people who've been coping through lockdown. Routine rituals. No one is going to come and save you. And because of this, you must fold your clothes at day's end, despite the urge to abandon them to the backs of chairs. You must shake the crumple of sleep from the sheet. You must clean your teeth, wash the teaspoons, fold your pajamas too, and lay the neat squares to rest under your pillow of a morning, despite the fact that in a few hours, all will be done again in reverse. All will be undone, and there will be no one to see. No one will know the bed corners were tucked into triangles. No one will see the sleeves cross empty arms against flattened chests and wait quietly. No one will know if the spoon was licked before it re-entered the jam jar. And no one will call you to bed, and to the relief of sleep, that midnight hour must be crossed alone. The curtains drawn and redrawn, drawn and erased. Be wary of sitting too long in a warm place, of holding cups of tea for too long, or lying in bed thinking in the morning. Be up and doing, up and at 'em. Be the bird that gets the worm before it eats the apple. Try to resist writing poetry. So, oh, and there you see them all again together. And the last thing now that I want to read to you was based on my texture project. So here's the texture project. And in fact, I have to do a little sneaky thing because there are so many images in the other. I stop the share and exit from that one and open my next one. Hold on 1 second, second half. Right, because as you probably know, PowerPoint tends to drop out if you have two PowerPoints open at the same time. Right, so I'll screen share again. Oops. There we go. So the texture project, I'm not going to say a lot about it because you can find out all the information in the book, plug book. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Recent Works Press. But basically it was a grant that I got from Arts ACT, which was not the year to get a grant for choir singing and poetry, I'll tell you that. Choirs were one of the first things that were axed during COVID. So instead of taking a year, it took 2 years. We couldn't rehearse for a year. It was very complicated, but it was a really beautiful project and I was really excited to be part of it. In fact, we've got one of the composers I noticed in our list here as well, which is fantastic. So I'll tell you very fast. I wrote one poem called If I Could Have Given You a Note. That poem was then sent out to 6 different composers. Those 6 composers turned that one poem into 6 different compositions that was then sung by this choir, Oriana Chorale in Canberra. And whilst they were singing each of the 6 different versions of this one poem, I had done 250 drawings, which were then projected almost like a movie in time with the music. And each of the sets of projections were based on the colours, sounds, shapes, textures, ideas that I had from that music. So it's sort of an ekphrastic and a synesthetic exercise, really. And it was a real joy. And then at the end, because I wanted to come back full circle, I took those drawings and made a final poem in response to each of those 6. So basically one poem goes on a little journey through composition, song, drawing, projection, and background to poetry again. So it was bigger than Ben-Hur. I think I bit off more than I can chew, but it was a total joy. And the book is huge. The book is 164 pages, all full colour. Absolutely a beautiful production. We got really special paper and the imagery and the colours are really beautiful. So do grab it if you get a chance. And in that it describes all of the process whereby you can turn music into art and art back into words again. And the composers also talk about their process of turning a poem into music. So it's a really interesting ekphrastic and synesthetic project. Okay. This is just to give you an idea. This is the first of one of the sort of PowerPoint projections for one of the composers to give you an idea that each one had their own colours and shapes. So this was all about soap bubbles, lots of blues and purples. The next one was much more orange, angular, folds and light. The next one was all about these beautiful reds and pinks and soft textural, almost carpet-like fabric, textile sort of associations. And one of the other ones, I'm not doing all of them, this is the last one, was a very greens and pinks and very organic shapes, and lots of sort of light through leaves. So it just gives you an idea that each piece had its own really different characteristic. Oh, I'll just go back. Ooh, sorry, I'll just start that again. Okay, so that's the thing, timing. Once the images start, I've got to catch up. Okay, so the poem is called If I Could Have Given You a Note. And that was the fundamental first poem that everything else was based on. If I could have given you a note at the blue hour of your time, it would have the likeness of a soap bubble and its rainbow blown for children clapping, children happy, held in the air until they burst. And I would have held you longer. The note I'd give would have the silver gleam of space blanket come to the rescue, reflecting you back to you on the cold side of the mountain with its dark edge. The note would be a cup of tea to hold your hands around, knees touching knees and breath of steam. It would be the northern star to your ship and the lighthouse too, Orion and the hunter, the rocks softened in the light. The note would be cat on lap and plant growing sapling strong on windowsill and green spring, green dawn, green leaping love. My note would have the warmth of one voice and of many. It would be the long sustain, the held chord, the sudden intake of breath, the pause and the rest. If I could have given you a note in your time of silence, it would have the shape of my heart. And I'll just take up the last minute to give you a sort of a sense of how then the final poems, that was, I forgot to mention that ended up, as I was reading the poem, I just made a compilation of all 6. So that's why there was a mixture, because of course each one would be with its 5-minute musical rendition. But to read the poem, I just borrowed images from each of the different 6 ones. But for instance, take the first ones that you saw that were all these blues and purple soap bubbles. I did those in response to one of the composer's pieces that really made me think of the likeness of a soap bubble and the blues and the purples. And at the end, I'll just now read you an example of one of these final poems that then follows on past the music, past the artwork, and returns again to the poem. And you might have noticed that some of those blue floating soap bubbles started to look a little bit like the Earth or a planet or the moon or a sort of a universal planetary system. And so I used that in this final poem, and it's called Eta Carinae, which is based on one of the stars. You are a luminous blue variable, how you fade and brighten. The eye loses you a while and finds you ultraviolet, lighter than air. The held breath of you has escaped its skin, its outer casing. You are all around now. And I might just leave it there because I think I have probably taken up all of my allotted time. But it's been wonderful to have you all on the journey. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, absolutely. What a complete treat for us, and what a wonderful journey to go with you on. That was absolutely wonderful. And, you know, I think we could probably listen on, but you know, we really appreciate you sharing with us. What an amazing set of projects. And I think, Rose Van Son, you might have said, does this woman ever sleep? And yes, you might wonder.
Yeah, I don't think I slept much in the last year, I'll tell you that.
Well, you've been putting it to good use. So thank you so much. And, you know, do take note of all those, you know, links in the chat to get hold of Sarah's work. But, you know, I really think we got the jewel in the crown tonight, seeing Sarah, hearing Sarah, and seeing the images as well. So absolutely wonderful.